I never asked for this. 5 words. That's all it took for a 17-year-old boy to reject billions of dollars and break his mother's heart in the process. Lisa thought marrying Walter Russell would save her son from the poverty that had nearly destroyed them both. Instead, she watched Harry suffocate under the weight of gratitude he never owed. The morning Walter announced Harry as his heir, standing in a room full of lawyers, ready to hand him everything, Harry said those 5 words and walked out. What Lisa didn't know, what she'd been too afraid to admit for 3 years, was that she hadn't rescued her son by marrying a billionaire. She'd traded his soul for his security. And the price of that bargain was about to come due in ways none of them could imagine. The 5 words that shattered a billion-dollar legacy were spoken in a voice that barely shook. Harry Green stood in the center of his stepfather's study, surrounded by lawyers in expensive suits and a mother whose hands wouldn't stop trembling. And he said them like he'd been rehearsing for years, like he'd been holding them behind his teeth through every formal dinner, every corrected posture, every reminder of how lucky he was. I never asked for this. 5 words, 22 letters, and just like that, a billion-dollar inheritance meant nothing. But let's back up. Because what happened in that room didn't start that morning. It started 3 years earlier, when Lisa Green made a choice she thought would save her son. And it started 10 years before that, when she was a different kind of invisible. The kind that comes from working double shifts while your child sleeps, from checking your bank account before buying milk, from learning that silence is safer than hoping out loud. The morning Walter Russell announced his heir, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Russell estate, catching on marble so white it looked like it had never been walked on. The kind of house that makes you aware of your breathing. The kind of wealth that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't have to. Lisa stood beside her husband, her wedding ring heavy in a way that had nothing to do with the diamonds. She'd been a single mother 10 years ago, counting coins at a kitchen table while Harry slept in the next room, his stuffed bear visible through the doorway. Now she wore clothes that cost more than a month's rent used to. Now she lived in a house with 17 rooms. Now her son had opportunities she'd only dreamed about. And now, watching Walter adjust his cufflinks with that particular calmness billionaires have, the kind that comes from controlling rooms, from bending futures, she felt her pulse betray her. Walter cleared his throat, not loudly. Men like him didn't need volume. "Harry," he said, his voice smooth as the marble floors. "I've decided to name you my primary heir." The word landed heavy. Heir. It meant billions. It meant legacy. It meant erasing the fact that Harry was not Walter's biological son, but the child Lisa had brought into this marriage like something fragile she was terrified of dropping. Lisa turned toward Harry, waiting for surprise. Maybe gratitude, at least relief. Instead, her son laughed. Not loud, not rude, just hollow, like someone had scooped out the sound and left only the shape of it. "Is that it?" Harry asked. Walter's frown was slight, controlled. "That's not a small thing." Harry leaned forward, elbows on his knees. 17 and restless, with Lisa's eyes, sharp now, calculating in a way that made her stomach drop. He looked so much like the boy she'd raised alone, curious, guarded. But there was an edge to him now, a distance that had been growing since the day she'd said yes to Walter's proposal. "You didn't choose me," Harry said, each word deliberate. "You chose your name." The room went still. Lisa's heart dropped. "Harry!" But Walter raised one hand, signaling calm, while something cold flickered behind his eyes. The gesture was small, dismissive. The kind of thing you do when you're used to controlling conversations. I gave you everything, Walter said. Education, access, opportunity. Harry nodded slowly, like he'd expected exactly this response. Yeah, and you remind me of it every chance you get. That wasn't how this was supposed to go. The plan had been simple. Walter would secure Harry's future, and in doing so, finally silence the whispers that followed Lisa everywhere in Walter's world. The whispers that said she was a liability, that her past was messy, that her son was borrowed, not built. Kendra, Walter's assistant, stood near the window, staring at her clipboard like it might save her. Clayton, one of the attorneys, shifted his weight uncomfortably. Even Margie, the housekeeper who'd worked for Walter for decades, lingered by the doorway, sensing something breaking. Walter stepped closer to Harry. I'm offering you a legacy most people would kill for. Harry stood, and that's when he said it. Those 5 words that would crack everything open. I never asked for this. Lisa felt it like a physical blow, not because the words were cruel, but because they were true. Harry turned to her then, his voice softer but somehow more dangerous. Mom, do you know what it feels like? To be paraded around like a charity project? That's not, Walter started. Yes, it is, Harry cut in, his voice rising for the first time. You didn't see me until it made you look generous. Silence swallowed the room. You know that feeling, don't you? When someone mistakes generosity for love, when you realize you've been a story in someone else's redemption arc, not a person in your own life. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who claim to care about you, this story is going to hit different. Stay with me. Lisa stepped forward, her voice shaking. Harry, Walter was trying to... To what? Harry asked. Buy a son? The word buy hung there, poisonous. Walter's face hardened. Watch your tone. Harry laughed again. That same hollow sound. There it is. There it was. The truth underneath all the expensive gifts, the private schools, the opportunities that came with reminders attached. There it was. The transaction Harry had felt every single day for 3 years, but had never been allowed to name. Clayton cleared his throat, pretending to review documents. Kendra found something fascinating on her phone. Margie disappeared into the hallway. Lisa's hands were shaking now. Not delicate trembling. The kind of shaking that starts in your chest and spreads until you can't make it stop. Harry, she whispered. But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at Walter. And in that look was every corrected posture, every he'll adjust, every birthday party where classmates came for the house instead of for him. Every moment of performing gratitude when what he really felt was erasure. I'm done, Harry said quietly. And then he walked out. No shouting, no slammed doors, just a quiet exit that felt louder than any explosion could have been. The Heir documents sat on Walter's desk, unsigned. A pen lay beside them, untouched. Outside, through those floor-to-ceiling windows, the sun kept shining on the manicured lawn, like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Walter stood frozen, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. For the first time in his life, a problem he couldn't solve with resources. For the first time, money meant nothing. Lisa felt her legs give slightly. She caught herself on the arm of a chair. And in the silence Harry left behind, she finally understood something she'd been refusing to see for 3 years. She hadn't saved her son by marrying Walter. She'd asked him to disappear. She'd traded his identity for his security, his voice for his future, his right to be unhappy for his right to opportunities. And he'd been suffocating under the weight of her good intentions ever since. The lawyers packed their briefcases without speaking. Kendra mumbled something about rescheduling. The room emptied until it was just Lisa and Walter. "He'll come back," Walter said, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. Lisa didn't answer, because she knew something Walter didn't yet understand. Harry wasn't coming back. Not to this. Not to a life where love came with price tags, and gratitude was currency. She found him hours later, not at a friend's house, not at the basketball court he used to love before they moved to the estate. She found him sitting on a bench overlooking the city, hoodie pulled up, eyes red, not from crying, but from holding it back too long. Lisa sat beside him without speaking. Traffic hummed below them. The city stretched out in all directions, lights beginning to flicker on as evening approached. Up here, the Russell estate felt far away. Up here, they could breathe. "I ruined everything," Lisa whispered. Harry didn't look at her. He kept staring at the skyline, at the life they used to have somewhere down there in those streets. "No," he said finally. "You survived everything." It was the first time he'd ever said it out loud. The first time he'd acknowledged what she'd been through, the years of struggle, the impossible choices, the weight of raising him alone while the world told her she wasn't enough. Lisa's breath caught. "But surviving shouldn't have cost me who I am," Harry said, his voice quiet but steady. "And I can't keep paying that price." And what Harry did next would force everyone to choose sides. Because sometimes the most dangerous gift you can give someone is everything they never asked for. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from a fortune to find yourself again. 10 years before Harry walked out, Lisa was a different kind of invisible. The kind that comes from working double shifts while your body begs for sleep. The kind that comes from counting coins at a kitchen table at midnight, sorting bills by which ones could wait and which ones couldn't. The kind that comes from checking your bank account before buying milk and doing the math in your head. $3.49. You have $4.12. You can do this. And still feeling shame crawl up your neck at the register. It was 2015. Harry was 7 years old. Lisa worked at a medical billing office, the kind of place with fluorescent lights that hummed too loud and coffee that tasted like disappointment. She took every shift they offered her. Day shift, night shift, the weekend coverage nobody wanted. She took them all because that's what you do when you're the only thing standing between your child and instability. Her kitchen table wasn't fancy. Scratched laminate top, uneven legs, she'd wedged folded cardboard under to keep it from wobbling. But that's where she sat every night after Harry went to bed, spreading out bills like a card game she was always losing. Electric, water, rent, always rent. That one couldn't slide. Grocery money, Harry's school supplies. She'd move the piles around, trying to make the numbers work, her calculator showing her the same impossible math over and over. Through the doorway, she could see Harry sleeping, his stuffed bear tucked under one arm, his face peaceful in a way that made her chest ache. He didn't know yet how close they were to the edge. How many times she'd chosen between fixing the car and fixing dinner. How many nights she'd told him she wasn't hungry, when really she was just making sure there was enough for him. She wasn't asking for rescue. She was asking for rest. Just rest. But rest costs money. And money was the one thing she never had enough of. That's where she was, exhausted, invisible, surviving, when she met Walter Russell. It was a Saturday night in November. Lisa had picked up a coat check shift at a charity gala downtown. $18 an hour for 5 hours of standing in heels that pinched and smiling at people who didn't see her. But $90 meant groceries for the week, so she smiled. The ballroom was the kind of beautiful that feels hostile when you're broke. crystal chandeliers, women in gowns that cost more than Lisa's car, men in suits so expensive they didn't even look like suits, just fabric that understood its own worth. Walter Russell walked in distracted, already pulling out his phone, barely glancing at her as he handed over his coat. She took it, gave him his ticket, and he disappeared into the crowd without a word. 2 hours later, he came rushing back. "My phone," he said, patting his pockets, his face tight with the specific panic of powerful men when they lose control of something. "I think I left it in my coat." Lisa had found it an hour earlier, tucked in the inner pocket. She pulled it out and handed it to him without a word. He stared at her, then at the phone, then back at her. "You didn't look at it?" he asked. Not accusatory, genuinely surprised. "Why would I?" Lisa answered. It was such a simple response, obvious even, but Walter Russell was a man who'd spent his entire adult life around people who wanted something from him, people who angled, people who saw opportunity in every interaction, people who looked. What Walter saw in her wasn't love, not yet. It was something he'd never encountered before. Someone who didn't need him. That intrigue turned into pursuit. He asked for her number before he left that night. She hesitated. Men like him didn't date women like her. But he was persistent in that way. Wealthy people are. Like rejection is just a negotiation they haven't won yet. The first dinner was at a restaurant where the menu didn't have prices. Lisa wore the one dress she owned that didn't come from a clearance rack, and she still felt underdressed. Walter talked about his business, real estate, investments, things Lisa couldn't quite follow, and she mostly listened. He sent flowers to her office the next day. Expensive buns. The kind that made her co-workers whisper. Then came the gifts. A cashmere scarf, a pair of earrings, tickets to a show she'd never mentioned wanting to see. Lisa felt uncomfortable accepting them. Each one felt like it came with invisible strings, like she was accumulating a debt she didn't know how to repay. "I don't need saving," she told him one night when he tried to pay off her car loan. Walter smiled, like that was the most refreshing thing he'd ever heard. He thought it was honesty. It wasn't. It was self-protection. It was a woman who'd learned that accepting help meant owing, and owing meant losing pieces of yourself. But Walter was persistent, and kind, and so certain. When Harry met Walter for the first time, he was 14 years old, and polite, in that careful way teenagers are when they're trying to figure out if someone is safe. Lisa felt Harry's hand grip hers tighter than usual, as Walter knelt down to his level, trying too hard to connect. Walter brought Harry gifts. A remote control car that felt patronizing for a 14-year-old. A tablet loaded with educational games Harry hadn't asked for. A basketball signed by a player Harry didn't follow. Lisa noticed. She noticed how Harry said thank you without smiling. She noticed how Walter seemed to measure connection in dollars spent. She noticed the small gap forming between gesture and understanding. But she hoped it would smooth out. People learned, didn't they? Love could be built from gratitude, couldn't it? 6 months later, Walter proposed. It was elegant, public, at a restaurant where everyone was watching. Everything Lisa never wanted. The ring was enormous, the kind that feels heavy on your finger, not from the weight of gold, but from the weight of expectation. She said yes. Not because she was in love, not because she couldn't imagine life without him. She said yes because Harry deserved a chance she never had. She said yes because love could be built from gratitude. She said yes because she was so tired. The first year of marriage was an education in disappearing. They moved into the Russell estate. 17 rooms, marble floors, more space than Lisa had ever imagined living in. Harry got his own wing, his own bathroom, a bedroom twice the size of their entire old apartment. He started at a new school, private, intimidating, full of children who'd never worried about money, who took ski vacations and spoke French, and had never eaten dinner at a scratched kitchen table. Lisa watched her son try to fit in. She watched him learn to code switch, to hide where he came from, to perform belonging in a world that could smell his origin like dogs smell fear. Walter meant well. He really did. "He'll adjust," he'd say when Lisa expressed concern. "Kids are resilient." But Walter's version of helping was correcting. Posture, grammar, table manners. Small comments delivered casually, but landing heavy. "We hold our fork this way." "Stand up straight." "Enunciate." Each correction was a small erasure. Each adjustment said, "Who you were isn't good enough for who we need you to be." Lisa's unease grew like mold in the corner of an expensive house, quiet, creeping, impossible to ignore once you saw it. The moment she realized the true cost came when Harry was 14. They were talking about something trivial. She couldn't even remember what. And Harry referred to their old apartment as before. Not our old place. Not where we used to live. Before. Like it was something to forget. Like it was a phase he'd grown out of. Like poverty was an embarrassing medical condition he'd recovered from. That night, Lisa did something Walter never knew about. She kept paying rent on that old apartment. It was empty, barely furnished. A waste of money she technically didn't need to spend. But she kept it anyway. Lisa kept paying rent on that old apartment. Walter never knew. And the reason why would become the most important decision she ever made. From 14 to 17, Lisa watched her son become someone else. The distance grew like a wall being built one brick at a time. Fewer conversations, more silence. Harry excelled at school, straight A's, honor roll, college recruiters already circling, but he seemed hollow. Like achievement had replaced personality. His birthday parties were painful to watch. Classmates showed up for the house, for the pool, for the catered food, not for Harry. They'd take selfies in the grand entryway, post about the crazy party at the Russell estate, and barely talk to the boy whose birthday it was. One night, Lisa found Harry sitting alone in his room, staring at nothing. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine, Mom," he said. She knew he was lying. Mothers know. They know the difference between fine and performing fine. But she didn't push. And that silence would cost both of them 3 years of truth. By the time Harry turned 17, he'd learned to perform gratitude so well that even Lisa almost believed it. Almost. Because mothers know. They know when a smile is real and when it's survival. And Lisa had been surviving long enough to recognize the look in her son's eyes. The same look she used to see in the mirror. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to a child is give them everything except permission to be unhappy about it. That's a lesson a lot of us learned too late, with our own kids, our marriages, our lives. If this is resonating, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. You're not alone in this. And now, we come back to that bench, to a 17-year-old boy who finally said the thing he'd been holding for 3 years, to a mother who realized she'd traded her son's identity for his security, to the moment everything cracked open, because what happened next would force all three of them to choose, keep performing or start being real. The week before the Heir announcement, Walter made a comment he thought was generous. It was dinner. It is not the kind where family gathers around leftover pasta and talks about their day. The Russell kind. Formal, catered, more performance than meal. The Hendersons were visiting, James and Patricia, business associates of Walter's, who wore their wealth like a language Lisa was still learning to speak. The dining room table could seat 16. Tonight, it seated 4, which somehow made it feel more empty than intimate. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier. The salad course had edible flowers on it. Lisa had stopped being surprised by edible flowers. Patricia Henderson smiled at Harry across the table, the kind of smile adults give teenagers when they're about to ask the question. "So Harry, college plans?" she asked, dabbing her mouth with a napkin that probably cost more than Lisa used to spend on groceries. "You must be thinking about applications." Harry set down his fork, polite as ever. "Still deciding." It was a perfectly reasonable answer. A 17-year-old's answer. The kind of thing you say when the future feels both too close and impossibly far away. But Walter leaned forward, that particular energy wealthy men have when they're about to claim credit. "He's being modest," Walter said, his voice carrying that easy confidence that comes from never being contradicted. "Stanford, Yale, Princeton. He can have his pick. I've made sure of that. I've made sure of that." The phrase landed like a claim of ownership. Like Harry was a project Walter had successfully managed. Like those schools wanted Harry because of Walter's influence, not Harry's 4 years of perfect grades and sleepless nights studying. Lisa saw Harry's jaw tighten, just slightly, the kind of tension you'd miss if you weren't watching for it. She reached under the table and squeezed his hand, a small gesture that said, "I see you. I'm here." Harry's hand pulled away slightly, not dramatically, not with anger, just enough that Lisa felt the distance between them like a physical thing. Patricia was saying something about legacy admissions. James was nodding. Walter was explaining his donation history to various universities. The conversation moved on like nothing had happened. But something had. Lisa pushed her food around her plate, some kind of fish with a sauce she couldn't pronounce, and felt her stomach tighten. She'd felt this building for months, years maybe, this pressure, this sense that they were all playing roles in a production nobody had auditioned for. After the Hendersons left, after the handshakes and the promises to do this again soon, after their town car pulled away from the circular driveway, Walter found Harry in the hallway. Lisa was in the next room. She heard everything. "You've come so far," Walter said, his voice warm with what he thought was pride. "I'm proud of what we've built." "We." That word did damage. "I did the work," Harry said. His voice was quiet but firm. Walter chuckled. Not meanly. That was the worst part. He wasn't being cruel. He genuinely didn't understand why that would bother Harry. "With opportunities I provided." The exchange ended there. Footsteps, a door closing, silence. But the poison was spreading. Lisa stood frozen in the sitting room, her hands gripping the back of a chair. She should have spoken. She knew she should have spoken. Should have stepped into that hallway and said something to Walter, to Harry, to anyone. But she'd spent so long keeping peace that her voice had calcified into silence. She'd become so good at smoothing things over, at making excuses, at translating Walter's transactional love into something softer when she explained it to Harry. When had she stopped being Harry's mother and started being Walter's interpreter? That night, Harry came to Lisa's sitting room. It was late, past 11. Lisa was pretending to read a book she couldn't focus on, her mind replaying the dinner, the hallway conversation, every small moment, where she'd stayed silent. Harry stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, looking so much older than 17. "Can we talk?" he asked. These were rare moments now. Honest conversations between them had become scarce, replaced by surface-level exchanges about homework and schedules. Lisa set her book down. "Always." Harry sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped between his knees. He didn't look at her when he asked the question. "Mom, when you married him, did you think about what it would cost?" Lisa's breath caught. She'd been expecting anger, maybe, or complaints about Walter. Not this. Not a question that cut straight to the bone. "I thought about what it would give you," she answered carefully. "Security, opportunities, a future." "That's not the same thing," Harry said. He was right. She knew he was right. "Harry, I wanted you to have everything I never had," Lisa tried to explain, her voice shaking slightly. "No more counting pennies. No more worrying if we'd make rent. No more choosing between school supplies and groceries. But did you ask me if I wanted to be someone else's idea of successful?" Harry looked at her then, and his eyes were sharp with something that looked like grief. Lisa didn't have an answer. In that moment, she saw it clearly. She'd traded her son's identity for his security, and he knew it. He'd known it for 3 years and had been too kind, or too afraid, to say it out loud. "I'm sorry," Lisa whispered. Harry stood, not angry, not dramatic, just tired. "I know you are, Mom, but sorry doesn't give me back who I was before." He left the room quietly, closing the door with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. What Lisa didn't know was that Harry had already made a decision, and in 4 days, everyone would learn what it was. Meanwhile, in his study, Walter Russell was reviewing documents. The Heir paperwork was spread across his mahogany desk. Pages of legal language that all added up to one thing: securing Harry's future. Walter's lawyers had spent weeks preparing these documents, every contingency covered, every asset accounted for. It was generous. More than generous. It was transformative. His phone rang. Ruth, his older sister, the only person who still talked to him like he was just Walter, not Walter Russell, billionaire philanthropist. "I heard you're planning the announcement," Ruth said without preamble. She'd never been one for small talk. "News travels fast," Walter said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Are you sure Harry wants this?" Walter frowned. What 17-year-old wouldn't want financial security for life? Ruth's sigh carried through the phone line. "Maybe the one who wants a father, not a benefactor." The words landed wrong, accusatory. Ruth had never understood what Walter was trying to do, how hard he was working to give Harry everything. "I'm doing the right thing," Walter said, his voice tight. "For who?" Ruth asked. Walter ended the call, irritation crawling up his spine. He was doing the generous thing, the responsible thing. Setting up a teenager for life. Most people would call that exceptional parenting. Walter had spent his entire life believing that problems could be solved with resources. He'd never encountered a problem that couldn't. Until now. But he didn't know that yet. The next morning, Walter made a decision. The announcement wouldn't be private. It would be formal, public. He called in his lawyers, his assistant Kendra, even Margie, to prepare the house. This was important. This deserved ceremony. Lisa learned about the plan 24 hours before it was set to happen. "Why does it need to be such a production?" she asked Walter, anxiety threading through her voice. "Because it's important," Walter said, not looking up from his tablet where he was reviewing the announcement schedule. "Because it makes it real." "Maybe we should talk to Harry first," Lisa tried. "Just the 3 of us. Make sure he'll be thrilled," Walter interrupted, his voice carrying that certainty that left no room for doubt. "Trust me." She didn't trust him, but she'd long ago learned that her instincts were considered worry, and worry was considered weakness. That night, Lisa couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of a bedroom that still didn't feel like hers, listening to the silence of a house too big to feel like home. At 2 a.m., she got up to get water. Walking past Harry's room, she saw light beneath his door. He was awake too, both of them sleepless, both of them carrying things they hadn't said. She almost knocked, almost went in, almost asked him what he was thinking, what he was feeling, what he needed, but she didn't. Morning came the way endings do, inevitable, unremarkable, carrying the weight of every decision that came before. Lisa dressed carefully, choosing a dress that felt like armor. Walter reviewed his notes, practicing the words he'd say to secure Harry's future. Harry stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror and made a choice that would change all three of their lives forever. And none of them knew what was about to break. The silence Harry left behind felt like a third presence in the house. Hours passed. The lawyers had packed their briefcases and left without making eye contact. Kendra had mumbled something about rescheduling and disappeared. Even Margie, who'd worked for Walter for decades and had seen everything, moved through the mansion like she was walking through a crime scene. Lisa sat in Harry's room, untouched. His bed was made with hospital corners, something Walter had insisted he learn. His desk was organized, textbooks stacked by size, pens lined up like soldiers. No sign of chaos, no sign of a teenager, just absence. The room looked like a display in a furniture store, perfectly arranged, completely empty of life. She tried calling him, straight to voicemail. The automated voice felt like a door slamming in her face. She texted, "Please let me know you're safe." Ursty crawled by. Lisa stared at her phone so long the screen went dark, and she had to wake it up again, and again, and again. Finally, at 6:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. "I'm fine." Two words that meant nothing and everything. He was alive. He had his phone. He was choosing not to come home. Downstairs, Walter was in his study, the door closed, refusing to discuss it. Lisa could see the light beneath the door, could hear him on phone calls, business calls, not calls about his stepson, who'd just walked out. The staff moved quietly, sensing the fracture running through the house's foundation. This wasn't a normal argument. This was structural damage. By evening, Walter emerged. He found Lisa still in Harry's room, sitting on the edge of the perfectly made bed, her phone in her hands. "He'll come back when he realizes what he's giving up," Walter said, his voice carrying that certainty that had started to sound less like confidence and more like denial. Lisa looked up at him. "Really?" Looked at him. "What is he giving up, Walter?" "Security, opportunity, a future most people would." "He's giving up being bought," Lisa said, her voice sharper than she'd ever used with him. "That's what he's giving up." Walter's face shifted. Not anger, something colder. Dismissal. "You're being dramatic. This is teenage rebellion. It'll pass." Teenage rebellion? Lisa stood, and something in her that had been compressed for 3 years started expanding. "You don't even know what you did wrong. I offered him everything." "No," Lisa said, and her voice was shaking now. Not with fear, with rage she didn't know she'd been storing. "You offered him your version of everything. You offered him a life he never asked for. You made him feel like a project you were improving." Walter's face went cold, the way powerful men do when they're challenged. That particular stillness that says, "You're crossing a line." "I've given that boy." "Stop," Lisa said. "Stop telling me what you've given. Start thinking about what you've taken." For the first time since she'd married him, Lisa wondered if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. Not marrying him, staying silent while it fell apart. Walter turned and walked out of the room without another word. That was their first real fight, and it changed nothing except making the silence between them louder. Lisa waited until midnight. Then she grabbed her keys. She drove through the city, checking places Harry used to go. The old basketball court where he'd played before they moved to the Russell estate. The one with the bent rim and cracked pavement. Empty. The library where he'd studied for hours, back when they couldn't afford a quiet place at home. Closed. Dark. She sat in her car, not the Mercedes Walter had bought her, but her old Honda she'd insisted on keeping, and tried to think like her son. Where would he go? Where would she have gone? And then she remembered. The old apartment. Lisa had kept it. Kept paying. Rent on a place she never mentioned. A place Walter didn't know existed. Just in case. Now she knew why. She drove there, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. The building looked smaller than she remembered. Shabbier. The neighborhood looked tired, in a way that wealthy areas never do. Worn, but honest. She parked and climbed the stairs to the third floor, her heart hammering. And there he was. Harry sat outside the apartment door, back against the wall, knees pulled up, hoodie covering most of his face. He wasn't inside because he didn't have a key anymore. He was outside because he needed to remember where he came from. And Lisa had taken that from him by trying to give him more. "Harry?" she whispered. He looked up. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from holding it back too long. Lisa slid down the wall and sat beside him on the hallway floor. The carpet was worn, stained with years of foot traffic, and spilled things. It felt more real than any of the marble at the Russell estate. "I ruined everything," Lisa whispered. Harry didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead at the apartment door across the hall, 3B, where the Chins used to live before they moved to Queens. "No," he said finally, "you survived everything." It was the first time he'd said it out loud. The first time he'd acknowledged what she'd been through. The years of struggle, the impossible choices, the weight of raising him alone while the world told her she wasn't enough. Lisa started crying. Not delicate tears. Not the kind you can wipe away and pretend didn't happen. The kind that shake your whole body. The kind that come from a place so deep you didn't know it was there. Harry let her cry. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't tell her it was okay. Just sat beside her while she broke. When she could breathe again, he spoke. "I don't hate him, Mom. I just can't be his charity project." Lisa understood finally. Really understood. "He made you feel bought. Every single day." They sat in silence. Down the hall, someone's TV was on too loud. A door opened and closed. Life continuing like the world hadn't just fractured. "What do you want to do?" Lisa asked. Harry shook his head. "I don't know." More silence. The kind that's not uncomfortable. The kind that feels like finally being able to breathe. Then Lisa made a decision. "We don't go back until he understands." Harry's head turned sharply. "What?" "We don't go back until he understands what he did. What he's been doing." "Mom, you can't." "You're married to him." "You'd do that?" Harry asked, his voice small. "I should have done it 3 years ago." Lisa pulled out her keys, the ones she'd kept all this time, and unlocked the apartment door. Inside, the place was bare but clean. She'd kept it maintained, kept the utilities on, kept it ready, just in case. This was her escape plan, her insurance policy. The place she could return to, if the Russell life became unbearable. She'd never told anyone, not even Harry. Harry walked in slowly, looking around like he was walking through a museum of his own history. "You kept it?" "Yeah." "Why?" Lisa set her purse down on the kitchen counter, the same scratched laminate counter where she used to count coins. "Because I knew it might not work." Harry stared at her. "You knew?" "I hoped, but I prepared." There's wisdom in keeping something of yourself, isn't there? A piece nobody gets to touch or change or improve. The women watching this, you know what I'm talking about. That secret savings account? That friend your husband doesn't know about? That dream you haven't shared because you're afraid someone will talk you out of it? Hold on to those pieces. They might save you one day. Hit that subscribe button if you're learning that lesson alongside me." Harry laughed, not hollow this time, real. "Mom, you're kind of a badass. Don't tell Walter." They stayed in that apartment for 3 days. 3 days of pizza dinners delivered to the door. 3 days of conversations they should have had years ago. About what Lisa had sacrificed. About what Harry had lost. About what they both wanted. 3 days of Lisa remembering who she was before she became Mrs. Russell. 3 days of Harry learning that his mother was stronger than he'd ever given her credit for. And 3 days of Walter Russell sitting in an empty mansion, finally understanding what he'd lost. Walter Russell had built empires, but he'd never built an apology. Day 1 of their absence, he worked. Conference calls, emails, an acquisition deal that needed his signature. He moved through his routine like everything was normal, like his wife and stepson hadn't just walked out of his life. The mansion was quiet, but it had always been quiet. That's what he told himself. Day 2, he checked his phone compulsively. Between meetings. During lunch, he didn't eat, while pretending to read reports that might as well have been written in another language. No calls, no texts. Just silence. That felt louder than any argument. By day 3, the mansion felt too large, too quiet. Rooms he'd barely noticed before seemed to multiply. Hallways stretched longer. The marble floors echoed with emptiness. Margie found him standing in the dining room, staring at the table that seated 16. "Mr. Russell, should I prepare dinner for Mrs. Russell this evening?" she asked, her voice careful. "She'll be back," Walter said sharply. Margie gave him a look. She'd raised her own children. She'd seen this before. Men who confused control with love, who believed providing was the same as being present. "Will she?" Margie asked quietly. Walter's anger flared hot. Then it collapsed into something else. Uncertainty. A feeling he'd spent his entire adult life avoiding. He walked away without answering. The next afternoon, Ruth arrived unannounced. Walter's sister didn't knock. She never had. She walked into his study like she owned it, found him sitting at his desk, paperwork untouched, staring at nothing. "I told you this would happen," Ruth said. No preamble, no gentle approach. Walter's defenses snapped up immediately. "I gave that boy everything." "No," Ruth said, sitting down across from him, without being invited. "You gave him things. There's a difference." "I don't need a lecture, Ruth." "Clearly you do, since you're sitting here alone wondering why your family left." The sibling argument that followed was the kind only family can have. The kind that reaches back decades, pulling up old wounds like weeds. Ruth brought up their childhood. Their father, also wealthy, also distant, also a man who believed providing was loving. A man who wrote checks for boarding school, but missed every parent weekend. Who paid for the best universities, but never asked what they wanted to study. Who left them a fortune and a lifetime of trying to figure out what love was supposed to look like. "I swore I wouldn't be like him," Walter said, his voice tight. Ruth leaned back in her chair, her expression softening slightly. "And yet," those 2 words landed like a verdict. For the first time in 30 years, Walter's voice cracked, not from sadness, from the terrifying realization that he'd become what he hated. "I thought," he started, then stopped. "I thought if I gave them security, if I gave Harry opportunities, if I made sure they never worried about money, you'd be a good father?" Ruth finished. Walter nodded, not trusting his voice. "Walter," Ruth said gently, "Dad thought the same thing." After Ruth left, Walter did what he always did when faced with a problem. He tried to solve it with resources. His first instinct was financial, a grand gesture. He called his lawyers and had them draft documents for a trust fund in Harry's name. No strings attached, no conditions, just security. Then he called Lisa. She answered on the fourth ring. "What, Walter?" "I've set up a trust fund for Harry," he said, his voice carrying the pride of someone who thinks they've found the solution. 10 million. No restrictions. I thought... "He doesn't want your money, Walter," Lisa interrupted. "Everyone wants security." "Not everyone wants to be reminded they need it," Lisa said, her voice tired. The call ended badly. Walter sitting there with his phone, staring at legal documents that suddenly felt like evidence of his own failure. His frustration mounted. He was trying. Couldn't they see he was trying? He was losing them. Not to another man. Not to circumstance. To his own inability to see what they actually needed. 2 days later, Walter tried again. A family vacation, Europe, first class everything. Paris, Rome, Barcelona. Cities Lisa had mentioned, wanting to see years ago, back when they were still having conversations instead of just existing in the same house. He had his assistant arrange everything. The best hotels, private tours, a month away from everything, a chance to reset, to be a family. He emailed the itinerary to Lisa. Her response came back in minutes. One word, no. Walter's confusion turned to anger. He called her immediately. "I'm trying here," he said when she answered. "You're still trying to fix this with your credit card," Lisa said. "What do you want from me?" Walter exploded, his voice louder than he'd intended. Lisa's answer came quietly, devastatingly. "I want you to listen. Actually listen. Not plan, not solve, not fix. Just listen." "To what?" Walter asked. "To the sound of a 17-year-old boy who felt invisible in your house for 3 years," Lisa said. The line went dead. Walter sat there holding his phone, staring at flight confirmations on his computer screen. That meant nothing. Finally understanding. He didn't know how to love without transacting. And he had no idea how to learn. That evening, Margie brought him dinner. Steak, roasted vegetables. The kind of meal Walter usually praised her for. Tonight, he couldn't even look at it. Margie did something she'd never done in 15 years of working for him. She sat down across from him. "Mr. Russell," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I need to tell you something." Walter looked up, surprised. "I had a son," Margie said, 30 years ago. I was working for your father then, trying to provide for him." Walter had never heard this story. "I worked late every night, missed his school plays, missed his baseball games, missed dinner most nights. But I told myself it was worth it, because I was providing for him. Good school, nice clothes, everything he needed." Margie's hands folded on the table, her voice steady but weighted with old regret. "He cut me off when he was 25, said I'd never been there. I told him I'd worked myself to the bone for him. He said that's exactly the problem. I worked for him, not with him. I provided for him, but I was never present." Walter felt something tighten in his chest. 10 years of silence, Margie continued. 10 years before he called me again. You know what finally worked? Walter shook his head. I stopped sending money. Started sending letters. Not about my day. About his. Questions. Real questions. Things I should have asked when he was small. What he was afraid of. What made him laugh. Who he wanted to be. Isn't that the truth that hits hardest? That we can provide everything except presence. That we can secure futures, but lose the present. Some of you watching this are Margie. Some of you are her son. Some of you are trying not to become either. If this story is making you think about someone you need to reach out to, don't wait. Leave a comment, even if it's just to process what you're feeling. Sometimes naming it is the first step to fixing it. Margie stood, her hand briefly touching Walter's shoulder. "You can't buy back time, Mr. Russell. But you can show up differently for what's left." She left him sitting there, in the dining room, the untouched steak going cold. Walter moved to his study, sat in the dark. The city lights beyond his windows felt a million miles away. That night, Walter did something he hadn't done since he was a teenager. He pulled out a piece of paper and a pen, not his assistant's tablet, not a typed email, and he tried to write to Harry. 3 hours, 17 drafts, every single one ending up crumpled in the trash. "Dear Harry, I want to apologize." Too formal. "Harry, I know I messed up." Too casual. "I've been thinking about what you said." About him, not about Harry. Each attempt revealed the same devastating truth. Walter was trying to write to someone he didn't actually know. He didn't know Harry's fears, his dreams, what made him laugh, what kept him up at night. After 3 years of living in the same house, Walter didn't know his stepson at all. Because Walter finally understood the problem, he didn't know his stepson well enough to know what to say. It took Walter 2 weeks to write a letter Harry would actually read. The first attempts sounded like business proposals. "Dear Harry, I would like to propose a new framework for our relationship." Crossed out, crumpled, thrown away. The next batch apologized without understanding what for. "I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable." If. Like Harry's pain was a matter of interpretation. Like his invisibility was debatable. Trash. Then came the promises. "I'll be better. I'll do better. I'll give you space." More things Walter would give. More transactions disguised as love. None of them right. Ruth visited again, unannounced as always. She found Walter surrounded by crumpled paper, looking like a man who'd finally encountered a problem he couldn't purchase his way out of. "Let me see," she said, picking up one of the drafts. She read it, winced, set it down. "You're still telling him what you think he wants to hear," Ruth said. "Try asking instead." Walter looked up, exhausted. "Asking what?" "Who he is, who he wants to be. Questions you should have asked 3 years ago." What Walter was about to discover would change not just his relationship with Harry, but his understanding of what family actually means. On his 18th attempt, Walter stopped trying to sound like someone he wasn't. He wrote simply, honestly, without the armor of eloquence or the safety of formality. "I don't know what your favorite subject is. I don't know if you're afraid of anything. I don't know what makes you laugh when you're alone. I should know these things. I've lived in the same house as you for 3 years, and I don't know you at all." His hand shook slightly as he continued. "I'd like to, if you'll let me. No documents, no announcements, no expectations. Just questions, if you're willing to answer them." Walter stared at the letter. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't the kind of communication a man of his stature would normally send. It was vulnerable, in a way that made him uncomfortable. He sent it to Lisa first. The response came an hour later. "Send it to him." Lisa gave him the address, the old apartment Walter hadn't known existed, the escape plan his wife had kept hidden for 3 years. That knowledge stung. But he understood why now. Walter addressed the envelope in his own handwriting, walked to the mailbox himself instead of having someone else do it, dropped it in. For the first time in his adult life, Walter waited for something he couldn't control, and the waiting felt like drowning. 3 days later, Harry received the letter. He was alone in the apartment. Lisa had gone to pick up groceries. Real grocery shopping, the kind where you check prices and use coupons, the kind she'd almost forgotten how to do. Harry stared at the envelope. Walter's handwriting. Not typed by an assistant, not printed on expensive letterhead, just his stepfather's actual handwriting on a regular envelope. He opened it slowly, read it once. His first thought was cynicism. Another performance. But he read it again and again. What was different this time? No promises. No solutions. No offers of things Harry hadn't asked for. Just admission of failure. Just questions. Just honesty. When Lisa came home, arms full of grocery bags, she found Harry sitting at the kitchen table, the letter in front of him. "What do you think?" she asked carefully. Harry didn't look up. "I think he's trying." "Is trying enough?" Harry's pause stretched long. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "I don't know, but I think I want it to be." Harry was 17, old enough to protect himself, young enough to still hope that people could change. And that hope was terrifying. That night, Harry pulled out notebook paper, not expensive stationery, just the lined paper he used for school, and wrote back. "My favorite subject is history, not dates and wars. Stories about regular people who survived impossible things." His pen moved faster now, words flowing. "I'm afraid of becoming someone I don't recognize when I look in the mirror. I laugh at old YouTube videos Mom and I used to watch when it was just us." Then Harry wrote something that surprised even himself. "You want to know me? Start by knowing her, really knowing her, not as your wife, as the person who existed before you. If you can do that, maybe we can talk." He sealed the envelope before he could second-guess himself. Lisa read it over his shoulder as he addressed it. Tears slid down her cheeks, quiet and unstoppable. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Harry looked at her, really looked at her, and said something that broke her heart in the best way. "I'm giving him a chance. Not for him. For you." When Walter received Harry's response, he read the instruction, "Know Lisa first," and felt something shift. He'd married her without understanding her. He'd loved the idea of her, the woman who didn't want anything from him, who represented something pure in his transactional world. But he'd never asked who she actually was underneath the role of wife, of mother, of Mrs. Russell. Walter called Lisa. Not to fix things, not to offer solutions, just to ask. "Will you meet me?" he said. "Not at the house, somewhere neutral." "Why?" Lisa asked. "Because Harry's right. I need to know you." They met at a coffee shop downtown. Not the kind Walter usually frequented. No private rooms, no servers who knew his order. Just a regular place with mismatched furniture and a line of people on their lunch breaks. Lisa arrived first, wearing jeans and a sweater, looking more like herself than she had in years. Walter arrived 5 minutes later, looking out of place in his suit. They sat, ordered coffee. The silence between them was awkward, stilted, heavy with 3 years of conversations they hadn't had. Walter pulled out a small notebook. Lisa raised her eyebrows. "I want to remember," he explained, "if you'll tell me." Then he asked questions, real ones. "What did you want to be? Before me? Before motherhood? Before everything?" Lisa stirred her coffee, considering whether to answer honestly. "A teacher, elementary school. I liked the idea of helping kids who felt invisible." Walter wrote it down. "What's the worst thing that ever happened to you that I don't know about?" Lisa's breath caught. That was a big question, a real one. "When Harry was 5, we were evicted. I'd missed 2 months of rent. We lived in my car for 3 weeks before I could scrape together enough for a new deposit." Walter's pen stopped moving. He looked up, shocked. "I didn't know." "You never asked." He absorbed that. Wrote it down, continued. "What do you miss about your old life?" Lisa smiled, surprising herself. The feeling that what I did mattered. Not the big picture stuff, just the small things. Making Harry's lunch, walking him to the bus stop, knowing exactly how much money we had and where every dollar went. I was poor, but I knew who I was. Walter asked the question he'd been building to. Why did you keep the apartment? Lisa met his eyes. This was the truth she'd been avoiding. Because I was afraid, not of you, of disappearing into you. The coffee shop noise continued around them. Espresso machines hissing, conversations overlapping, life moving forward. But at their table, something was shifting. They sat in that coffee shop for 4 hours. Walter listened to stories about Lisa's childhood. A mother who left when she was 12. A father who tried his best, but didn't know how to raise a daughter alone. Her first job at 16. The moment she found out she was pregnant at 20. And the boyfriend who disappeared the same week, leaving her to raise Harry alone from the day he was born. The decision to keep Harry despite having nothing, despite everyone telling her she couldn't do it alone. He listened to her fears, that she wasn't good enough for Walter's world, that Harry would resent her for the marriage, that she'd lose herself completely and not even notice. Her regrets about staying silent when she should have spoken, about trying so hard to fit in that she'd forgotten how to stand out. And for the first time in their marriage, Walter didn't try to fix anything. He didn't offer solutions or resources or ways to make it better. He just bore witness. When they finally left, the sun was setting, painting the city in orange and gold. They walked to their cars, Lisa's old Honda, Walter's Mercedes, parked side by side like a visual representation of their marriage. Lisa turned to say goodbye. Walter reached for her hand, squeezed it gently. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. And it was a start. 3 weeks after Harry left, Walter knocked on the door of the old apartment. No security detail, no driver waiting downstairs. Just Walter Russell in a suit that cost more than 3 months' rent on this building, standing in a hallway that smelled like someone's cooking and old carpet. Lisa answered the door. Her shock was immediate. What are you doing here? Harry said to know you first. I'm trying, Walter said, his voice steady but not certain. But I think it's time I also tried with him. Lisa hesitated, her hand still on the doorknob, caught between protecting her son and hoping for something she couldn't quite name. Then Harry's voice came from behind her. It's okay, Mom. He appeared in the doorway, taller than Walter remembered. Or maybe Walter had just never really looked. The three of them moved into the small living room. The contrast was stark. Walter in his tailored suit, Harry in jeans and a hoodie, Lisa between them wearing an expression that said she'd either witness healing or watch everything burn. The space felt crowded suddenly, not because of bodies, because of everything unsaid. Walter sat on the edge of the couch, the only furniture besides a small table and 2 mismatched chairs. Harry took one chair. Lisa stood by the window, arms crossed, ready to intervene if this went wrong. Walter started badly. He knew it even as the words left his mouth. I want to make this right. You can't make it right, Harry said immediately. You can only do different going forward. The statement landed with the weight of someone who'd thought about this for weeks, who'd turned it over in his mind during sleepless nights, who'd decided exactly what he needed to say. Walter absorbed that, nodded slowly. Something shifted in his posture, a letting go of control he hadn't realized he was gripping. You're right, Walter said. I'm sorry. Harry's eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger. With the wariness of someone who'd heard apologies before that meant nothing. For what, specifically? This was the moment. Walter being forced to articulate his failures, to name them, to own them. He took a breath. For treating you like a project, instead of a person. Harry's expression didn't change. Walter continued. For keeping score of what I gave you, for reminding you, for making you feel like gratitude was rent you owed. Lisa's hand went to her mouth, for not asking what you wanted, for deciding what your future should look like without ever asking if that's what you wanted it to be. Walter's voice cracked slightly on the last one. For making you feel like you owed me your identity. The room was silent, except for the sound of someone's TV through the wall and traffic from the street below. Harry listened, his face unreadable. Not forgiving, not rejecting, just processing. Lisa watched both of them, barely breathing, her hands gripped so tight her knuckles were white. Finally, Harry spoke. "You hurt me," he said, his voice steady but weighted, not with cruelty, with indifference disguised as generosity. Walter flinched, not visibly, but Lisa saw it, the tiny recoil of recognition. "You never asked me about my day. You asked about my grades," Harry continued. "You never asked what I was afraid of. You told me I had nothing to fear, because you'd handle it." Each statement was a scalpel, precise and clean. "You never saw me. You saw the son you wanted." Walter took each statement without defending, without explaining, without the reflexive justifications that usually came so easily. "You're right," he said simply. "I know I am," Harry said. "That's not the question." Walter looked up. "What is?" Harry leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and asked the question that mattered. "The question is whether you actually want to change, or you just want me to come back so you can stop feeling guilty." The room went silent, Lisa's heart hammering, Walter's face going pale, because Harry had just named the thing Walter was terrified to admit. He didn't know. Walter stood, started pacing in the small space. 3 steps one way, turn, 3 steps back. His hands clenched and unclenched, his breath coming faster. "I don't know," he said, his voice shaking. "God help me, I don't know." The raw honesty shocked everyone, including himself. He stopped pacing, looked at Harry, then at Lisa, then at the floor. "I've spent 30 years being the man who always knows. The man with the plan. The man who fixes things. And I don't know how to fix this, because I don't even know what the right thing looks like anymore." Walter sat back down, head in his hands, the picture of a man who'd finally run out of certainty. This was Walter Russell without the armor, without the billions, without the certainty. Just a man who'd lost his way and was finally admitting it. Lisa's voice came quietly from the window. "Maybe that's the start." Walter looked up. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. The Heir documents, the ones that had started all of this. Still unsigned, still carrying the weight of everything wrong between them. "I don't want to give you the Heir documents," Walter said, his words measured, careful. Harry's confusion was immediate. "What?" "I want to tear them up, not to punish you, because they were the wrong gesture entirely." Walter pulled the documents from the envelope. Pages of legal language that added up to billions and meant nothing. "I had these drawn up because I thought that's what love looked like. Securing your future, giving you access to everything I built." He looked at Harry, really looked at him. "But you don't want my empire. You want to build your own." Walter tore the documents in half. The sound was surprisingly loud in the small room. Final, irreversible. "So here's what I'm offering instead." "Nothing." Harry's shock was visible now. "What?" "No inheritance, no heir title, no expectations, just a chance to start over, if you want it." Walter set the torn papers on the coffee table between them. "I can't buy you back. I can't fix the past 3 years. I can't make you someone you're not. All I can do is ask if you'd be willing to let me try to know who you actually are." Harry stared at the torn papers, at the billions that just became trash, at the gesture he'd never expected. "And what does starting over look like?" Harry asked, his voice careful. "I don't know. I think we figure it out together." Harry looked at his mother. "What do you think?" Lisa pushed off from the window, came closer, sat on the arm of Harry's chair. I think you get to decide. Not me, not him, you. This was the moment. The hinge, everything turned on. Harry could walk away with nothing and build his own life. Or he could take a risk on a man who'd failed him, hoping he might do better. Neither choice was wrong. Both were terrifying. Harry's silence stretched long. He looked at the torn documents, at Walter, at his mother. Then he said something that changed everything. I need time. Walter's relief was visible. How much? I don't know. That okay? Walter's voice broke slightly. Yeah, that's okay. That permission to need time, to not have answers, to let things be uncertain, that's the gift we don't give ourselves enough. We rush to fix, to decide, to move on. But some things need to breathe. Some things need space. If this story is, if reminding you that it's okay not to have it all figured out, would you share it? Someone in your life might need to hear that today. Hit that share button. You might be giving someone permission they've been waiting for. Walter stood to leave. No hugs, no dramatic reconciliation. Just a man walking to the door, turning back once. Thank you, he said, for letting me try. Harry nodded. Just once. Small, but it was something. Walter left the apartment that night without resolution, without forgiveness, without a clear path forward. Just the torn Heir documents left on the coffee table and a 17-year-old boy who finally had the one thing he'd never been given before: choice. And somewhere in that small apartment that used to be Lisa's entire world, the three of them started to understand that family isn't built with money or grand gestures. It's built with moments like this: uncertain, uncomfortable, real. Time doesn't heal, but it does reveal. Week 1 was distance. Harry stayed at the apartment with Lisa. Walter returned to the mansion alone. No calls, no texts, just space. The kind that feels like holding your breath underwater, not knowing if you'll surface or drown. Walter struggled with the silence. Every instinct screamed at him to reach out, to fix, to push, to do something instead of nothing. He'd pick up his phone a dozen times a day, type messages he never sent. Ruth called on day 4. Have you heard from them? No, Walter said. Good, Ruth replied. Good? You told him he could have time. Let him have it. Walter was learning what it meant to wait without controlling. It felt like dying. Meanwhile, at the apartment, Lisa and Harry were returning to old rhythms. Pizza dinners with paper plates, late-night TV with the volume low so they wouldn't disturb the neighbors. Conversations without performance, the kind where you say what you mean instead of what sounds right. One evening, Harry was trying to explain a meme to Lisa. She didn't get it, got it wrong 3 times. And then he laughed, really laughed. Not the polite sound he'd perfected at the Russell estate. The kind of laugh that comes from your stomach, uncontrolled and genuine. For the first time in 3 years, Harry laughed, really laughed, at something his mother said. And Lisa realized how long it had been since she'd heard that sound. Week 2 brought small steps. Harry's phone buzzed. A text from Walter. He stared at it for a full minute before opening it, bracing for pressure, or guilt, or manipulation. Instead, what's your favorite color? Harry blinked. Read it again. Showed it to Lisa. She smiled. He's learning. Harry understood then. Walter was doing what Walter had done with those letters. Asking questions. Building knowledge instead of assumptions. He typed back, green, like my last name. The significance of that answer, reclaiming his identity, wasn't lost on anyone. Walter's response came quickly. Blue, like the ocean. What's yours? Then, realizing his mistake. Sorry, you just told me. Green. Over the following days, more questions came. Walter, what's the best meal you ever had? Harry thought about it. Remembered. Mom's spaghetti when I was 8. We couldn't afford much, but she made it special. You? Walter's response took longer this time. I'm realizing all my best meals were expensive, and none of them mattered. They were building something new. Not father and son, not benefactor and recipient. Just two people trying to see each other clearly. Week 3, Lisa made a decision. She found Harry on the apartment balcony, barely big enough for one person, overlooking a parking lot instead of manicured gardens. I'm going back to the mansion, she said. Harry turned sharply. Why? Because that's my marriage, and I need to figure out if it's worth keeping. What if he hasn't changed? Harry asked, his voice tight with worry. Then I'll leave. For real this time. But I need to know. Lisa had spent her whole life adapting to other people's needs. First survival, then motherhood, then Walter's world. But somewhere in that old apartment, she'd remembered who she was underneath all the adapting. And that woman deserved answers. I'll come with you, Harry said immediately. No, this part I do alone. They hugged at the apartment door. Harry held on longer than usual. Mom, you're braver than you think. Lisa pulled back, cupped his face. I learned from watching you. Lisa returned to the mansion on a Tuesday afternoon. The house felt different somehow. Quieter, less performative, like someone had turned down the volume on Wealth. Walter was waiting in the living room, not his study. The living room, the space they never used because it was too formal, too much for actual living. I'm not back because everything's fixed, Lisa said, setting down her bag. I know, Walter said. I'm back because I need to know if you meant what you said. Every word. Lisa met his eyes. Then show me. What followed were weeks of different. Walter asking about Lisa's day and actually listening, not planning his response, not solving her problems, just listening. Walter attempting to cook dinner, badly. Setting off the smoke alarm twice, but trying. Margie finding him in the kitchen at 7 p.m., sleeves rolled up, covered in flour, following a YouTube tutorial, like his life depended on it. Walter canceling business meetings to be present. His assistant Kendra, nearly having a heart attack the first time he said, reschedule it, I have plans. His plans being sitting with Lisa while she painted, a hobby she'd mentioned wanting to try years ago that he'd never asked about again until now. Walter reading the books Lisa recommended, not skimming, actually reading, leaving notes in the margins with his thoughts. Walter sitting with discomfort instead of solving it. Lisa crying about something from her past, and Walter's hands literally shaking with the effort not to fix it, just holding her instead. The changes were small, imperfect, but real. Walter asking Lisa what she needed instead of assuming. Walter saying, I don't know, when he didn't know. Those 3 words that used to be impossible for him. Walter admitting when he was scared. Walter letting Lisa see him vulnerable. Crying during a movie, frustrated when the dinner burned, lost when he couldn't figure out how to be better. 4 weeks in, Walter did something that surprised everyone. He created a family group chat, just the 3 of them, named it simply Us. His first message, no pressure, just wanted to create a space if you ever want to talk. Harry didn't respond immediately. The message sat there for 3 days, read but unanswered. Then on day 3, a notification. Harry had sent a meme. Walter stared at his phone, completely confused. He typed, I don't understand this. What does it mean? Harry's response, it's a joke about waiting for something good to happen. Lisa joined in. I don't get it, either. Harry, you two are impossible. But there was affection in it. Small exchanges built over the following days. Photos. Lisa sending pictures of her paintings. Walter sending a picture of his burnt dinner attempt. Harry sending a sunset from the apartment balcony. Jokes that didn't always land but were received with effort. Eventually, real conversation. It wasn't repair. Not yet. It was demolition of what was broken and the earliest foundation of something new. Fragile, uncertain, but real. Week 6. Harry called Lisa. "Do you think he's actually changed?" he asked without preamble. Lisa sat down on the bed, their bed, hers and Walter's, though it still felt strange to think of it that way. She'd been asking herself the same question. "I think he's changing. That's not the same as changed. But I think he's willing to keep trying." "Is that enough?" Harry asked. "Only you can answer that?" Harry's pause stretched long. Lisa could hear traffic through his phone, the sounds of the city he'd returned to. Then quietly, "I think I want to come home." Not to his house. To wherever we are. Lisa started crying. The good kind. The kind that releases instead of burdens. "Come home, baby." 6 weeks after Harry walked out of the Russell estate, he walked back in. But this time, it was different. No announcement, no lawyers waiting in the study, no performance. Just a 17-year-old boy carrying a duffel bag, his mother beside him, and a man waiting at the door. Walter stood in the entryway, not perfectly composed, his eyes red, his hands trembling slightly. He opened his mouth, closed it, had no idea what to say. Finally, simply, "I'm glad you're here." Harry nodded once, just once, small but deliberate, and they went inside together to figure out what came next. 3 months later, Walter did something he'd never done before. He asked Harry if he wanted to go to a basketball game. Life in the Russell house had been rebuilt differently. Not perfect, not without awkward moments or misunderstandings, but different. Dinners where they actually talked. Not about achievements or grades, but about the kind of nothing's everything that makes up real conversation. Weekends without agenda. Saturday mornings where Walter didn't check his phone every 5 minutes. Sunday afternoons where they existed in the same space without performance. Harry was back in school, senior year, but with new boundaries. When he made honor roll, Walter congratulated him. Didn't take credit. Didn't remind Harry of the opportunities he'd provided. Just said, "I'm proud of you," and left it at that. Walter was learning to celebrate without claiming. Lisa was thriving in ways she hadn't known were possible. Taking art classes at the community center. Reconnecting with old friends from before the marriage. People she'd let fade because they didn't fit Walter's world. Reclaiming space in the house. Turning one of the 17 rooms into a studio where she could paint without worrying about marble floors. The house felt smaller somehow. Not because it had changed. Because they'd stopped performing for it. The basketball game was Harry's idea, actually. A college game. Not professional. No luxury boxes or VIP treatment. Just regular seats in the student section where people yelled and spilled beer and didn't care who Walter Russell was. The awkwardness was immediate. Walter in jeans, actual jeans, not designer ones, looking uncomfortable. Harry in his usual hoodie, wondering if this was a mistake. But then the game started. Harry explaining plays. Walter listening, asking questions that were actually questions, not disguised lectures. Walter buying overpriced hot dogs from a vendor, fumbling with the money, laughing at himself. Harry explaining a 3-point play for the 3rd time, while Walter tried to understand why the ref made that call. It wasn't a hallmark moment. It was better. It was clumsy and imperfect and real. It was 2 people trying, walking back to the car afterward, both of them hoarse from yelling. Harry said something simple. "Thanks for coming." Walter stopped. looked at him. "Thanks for inviting me." The simplicity of it meaning everything. Weeks later, over dinner, in the kitchen, not the formal dining room, Walter brought out documents. Harry's body tensed immediately. Lisa's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "It's not what you think," Walter said quickly. He slid the papers across the table. Not Heir documents, not trust funds. Something else entirely. A scholarship fund, in Harry's name. But not for Harry. For kids like Harry used to be, smart, capable, from single-parent homes who needed opportunity without strings attached. No expectations of gratitude, no requirements to change who they were. Just support, just chance. Harry could run it if he wanted, or not. No obligations, no pressure. "You taught me something," Walter said, his voice steady but weighted with meaning. "That the best inheritance isn't what you leave someone, it's what you learn from them." Harry stared at the papers, at the fund structure, at the mission statement that read like someone had finally understood. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Because I want to build something that matters. And you showed me what that looks like." Harry's eyes filled with tears. Not from gratitude, from finally being seen. From realizing that Walter had learned what love actually means. Letting someone change you. He picked up the papers, read them carefully, every word, every clause designed to help without controlling. Then he signed his name on the line that said Advisory Board. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. But he had one condition. "My mom's name goes on it, too. The Lisa and Harry Green Scholarship Fund." Walter's surprise was genuine. Then understanding flooded his face. "The Lisa and Harry Green Scholarship Fund, sponsored by the Russell Foundation," he said, already making the mental adjustment. Lisa started, crying, the kind of tears that come from being acknowledged, from mattering, from your name meaning something because of who you are, not who you married. The three of them sat together at that kitchen table, papers between them, and understood something fundamental. This was the inheritance that mattered. Not money, not access, but transformation. Walter had learned. Lisa had reclaimed herself. Harry had taught them both what it means to be seen. 6 months later, Harry graduated high school. He'd been accepted to 3 universities. Chose the one he wanted. Not the most prestigious, not the one with Walter's name on a building, but the one with the best social work program. Because Harry had decided what he wanted to do. Help kids who felt invisible learn that they mattered. Walter attended graduation, cheered loudly when Harry's name was called, embarrassed Harry in the best possible way, by standing and clapping while everyone else sat down. Lisa recorded it on her phone, laughing at both of them. Lisa had started a blog, Reinventing Yourself at Any Age, writing about her journey from poverty to wealth and back to herself. The response surprised her. Thousands of women who felt seen, who'd also lost themselves trying to fit into someone else's life. Walter and Lisa's marriage was different now, built on honesty instead of rescue, on partnership instead of provision. They fought sometimes, real fights, not cold silences, and they worked through them. The scholarship fund awarded 12 students its first year. Harry read every essay, cried at their stories, understood why his own story mattered, not because of where he ended up, but because of what he'd refused to become. When people asked Harry about being Walter Russell's heir, he'd smile and say something that became his truth. I inherited something better. I inherited the right to choose who I want to be. And that changed everything. One evening in late summer, the three of them were in the kitchen, not the formal dining room with its table for 16, the kitchen, making dinner together. Walter chopping vegetables with improving but still questionable knife skills. Lisa at the stove, teaching him about seasoning. Harry setting the table and mocking them both gently. They argued about how much garlic was too much garlic. Laughed when Walter added way too much and had to start over. Existed together without agenda. Walter's phone rang. A business call, based on the ringtone. He glanced at it, then silenced it. "It can wait," he said. Harry noticed. Met Walter's eyes across the kitchen. The smallest nod between them. Acknowledgement. Lisa watched both of them, smiling in that way mothers do when they see their children, biological or chosen, finally okay. This was the life Lisa had hoped for when she married Walter. Not the mansion, not the money. Just this. Her son being seen. Her husband being present. Her own voice mattering. It had taken breaking for them to rebuild it right. But they had. And it was worth every hard conversation, every tear, every moment of uncertainty. They sat down to eat. The food wasn't fancy. Pasta with too much garlic that they'd laugh about later. Salad from a bag. Bread from the store. Walter asked Harry about his plans for college. What classes he was excited about. What he was nervous about. Harry answered honestly. About his fears of not being good enough. About his hope that he could help people the way he wished someone had helped him. Walter listened without correcting, without offering to fix, just listened. Lisa squeezed both their hands, no words needed. The inheritance was never about billions. It was about this. Choosing to show up, choosing to change, choosing each other every single day. And that was the legacy that would outlast any fortune.